Before the storm. Scott? 1 o'clock's ticked over, everybody, so we'll open the ICM meeting and welcome to every councillor, staff, Mr. Veach, who's a visitor, and Marcus, and I think Mr. French. Chris, is it? Welcome on behalf of as the author of one of our reports, so welcome to our chambers today. I'd just like to open with our committee prayer, so we'll just do that. Thank you. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a team and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make decisions that will affect the ratepayers, all our citizens, staff and stakeholders of our district. And continue to remind us that all we do here today, all that we accomplish is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater benefit of our people and the Te Aroha. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. So we'll get on with the meeting. Any apologies? I think one apologies from Brian Nicholson, who is ill. Someone would like move in a seconder. Councillor Mike, Councillor Mayor Tracy, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Public forum, we haven't had any notification, but you're just here to have an observation, Mr. Veach? Good, okay. Thanks very much, Richard. You're very welcome to be here. Notifications of items not on the agenda. Oh, I just want to remind you that this meeting is recorded, team too. So just item number 4, there was a late item. It was probably my mistake not to formally advise it, but me, Tracy, myself and Hamish did attend the Road Controlling Authority seminar symposium recently, and if with the leave of councillors you're happy for us to give you a bit of a verbal today at the end of it, that you're happy with that, that we will do that later on in the agenda. Irina, councillor.
I'm just wondering, are we able to have a update on Allardyce Street wastewater? Is that possible? Allardyce Street wastewater pipe? Just getting a lot of questions from the community. Is there anyone here who can do that at the end?
Direction to you.
I don't have to find out from Eddie. I can get some information. I can give him a call and get some information.
If that's all right at the end, just briefly.
Councillor, you're in a aware of it, and be Tracy obviously. So have you got something that we can perhaps pass on to Hamish or Marcus that's a concern of?
Oh, I just, because it was projected for just meant to be a month, and they've been there for like nearly a couple of months. And it was, they did have a problem right at the start, so I just wanted to make sure that it was all not going over budget. And I just had quite a few questions from the community.
Well, we might as well.
Thank you.
So I am aware of a few issues that they've had on that. So we originally CCTV'd the pipe back a number of years ago, and it showed it as a grade 5 pipe. When they went in there to do the relining work, they found that the pipe had actually degraded a lot faster than anticipated. So that the liner that they'd actually purchased, they had to purchase another liner to be able to strengthen the pipe sufficiently to keep the integrity of the pipe. So essentially when you're relining it, you're just using the old pipe, but you're actually putting a liner inside it to reinstate it, which prevents the open cut trenches. The other thing they had to do was put in some additional manholes because the length between the manholes that are presently there were too far apart. So they had to put additional manholes in to be able to shorten the distance between the pipe lengths. Any other information I can get you, that's all that I know about those physical part of the work that's caused it delays.
No, that's great. I just want to double check because they have been there for quite a long time, and a few of the community were asking. So, and that makes sense that they've had those hold-ups with the wrong liner and stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. Sorry to be help with that, but it's probably indicative of a lot of Dannyvex pipes once we start going, yeah, indicative of our infrastructure, isn't it really? But sadly, anyway, thanks for that, Marcus, much appreciated. We'll move on. Any declaration of conflicts of interest? No. We'll move on to the confirmation of minutes from our last meeting. So I'll just moved by Councillor Steve and Peter seconded. We'll flick through the pages one by one. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. We'll move into, oh, we had a move and seconder. All in favour? Carried. Thank you for those. Right, we'll move on to reports. It will be in your hands for the main report, Hamish. Thank you.
Chair Kerry, and good afternoon, everybody, councillors and staff. Thanks for coming along. So we'll take the report as read generally and just work our way through it. We do have a couple of absences today, so between us we'll be trying to juggle answering to questions, but there may be some we have to come back to at a later date. So just bear that in mind. And we do have Chris French here and Marcus to talk through the rationale report. So if we start, do you want to?
Yeah, so council was quite a bit in the report, so we go through page by page and maybe we'll do the items to run across them. Okay, my page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Councillor Sharon.
No, you're keeping it all here.
I was watching.
Thank you, Chair Kerry. I really appreciate the work that's going on in transport, Hamish. I have a slightly higher level. Those around the Dannyvex area would have experienced in the last month diversion around the Tamaki River Bridge. And I assumed that that was a Waka Kotahi job. But what engagement did they have with our transport team on the ground? Because anyone who lived around that area feared for their lives for about a week. And anyone who travels the top of Laws Road, and I came down this morning on my way to the meeting just to confirm, the damage and the cutting out that the trucks had to do to be able, I mean, it was certainly a 3-lane highway going in terms of traffic there for that week. The other concern that I had was at the intersection of Laws Road and Topgrass Road, there is a stop sign. And the locals know that it hasn't been yellow painted for years. And if it has, it's all been covered up by the rat bags that. And I would have thought, and this is why I'm asking the question, that prior to such a huge diversion taking place, there would have been some assessment of the official detour routes. And someone would have picked up, there's no yellow lines across the stop sign and all hell is going to break loose, which it did. Here comes Andrew, we're all good. The other question I have, Mr. Chair, is if an accident occurs on our roads during that time, who do those accidents get reported to? Is it a Waka Kotahi issue? Oh, wow, we've got the whole team here. Or is it us? I was just really concerned that the potential for, and I know of one accident that happened, the potential and the anger that was certainly being expressed. I drove down there one night to Woodville and I stayed off that road for the rest of the week. It was just a nightmare. So long story short, what assessment was done prior? We're now left with roads that have got, if you go up top of Laws Road, the gouging out along the side that I assume we will have to remediate. So got all those questions, Andrew?
Welcome, Andrew and Jordan. So we'll let you have a chat. There has been a bit of discussion around the community at all our public meetings about this thing. It wasn't really on our long-term plan, but it came to our long-term plan. So
Yeah, I've just recently inherited this conversation back in the Alliance. From the process point of view of establishing the detour, that's driven by traffic management changes into the approach for traffic management. Obviously, performing work like that under a road closure is more efficient. Hence, they can deliver the work quicker. The process that it goes through is it goes through to our corridor management team, which, from what I've picked up over the last literally week about how it's happened, hasn't been the greatest process, given NZTA have their own little internal things that we're aware of that they're trying to work through. Tomorrow I have a meeting with Higgins, Becker, NZTA about the whole scenario, because that even NZTA have recognised that what didn't follow their process well. NZTA do have a journey manager, which is supposed to be over top of this stuff to sort of help plot this thing. And from what I've picked up is the journey manager was not aware this was going on. From a road safety point of view, from what we did before the detour commenced, Jordan's team drove the network first and foremost, identified all the network faults that we had there, the pre-existing network faults, and we've driven it after the fact to capture the damage that's been done, which is hence part of tomorrow's meeting, is to actually go forward and present that to say, well, what are you guys going to do about it? While you've saved money here from your bridge repair, you may have cost us twice as much in terms of damage.
Through you, GQ, that's my concern is, we've ended up with messes to clean up. The irony is they've repainted the stop sign yellow lines after the event.
That would be probably something from a process point of view, without, I suppose, being able to speak for the previous people that were in organising the detour, past predecessors. It is something that we probably need to flag on our list as well, to make sure that we're raising that before the detour occurs, because you're right, I went through that site myself, and yeah, I saw exactly what was going on there. It was quite interesting. We were getting a lot of rat running, I suppose, down the alternative routes. And so while there was the defined route, they were all going back the other way into Woodville. So there's further damage that we're also network assessing. So yeah, it looked like it was going to be this big. It's potentially got this big. Jordan's team is going to working through analysing the data to actually value it, which will help with the conversation that I've got tomorrow. But essentially, yeah, it's across the board. I suppose it's an interesting process, because these things are going to be promoted more and more. Yeah. And I think there's another one up north they're working towards right now, that Jack's informed me of. So Jack's still, while he's not the corridor manager anymore, he's still quite all over the stuff. So yeah, me, Jack, myself and Rick essentially are following up with NZTA now.
Interesting to see through you, Cheeky, what the trucking firms thought of the proposed routes.
Just to give some further insight, being involved in the process a bit longer than Andrew, there has been a lot of backwards and forwards between the people organising the detour, whether they were the correct people or not, and our team, particularly around concerns of safety. Lack of communication has been a big one for us, especially knowing that there are 3 level stock crossings on Kumiti Road, for example, and that sort of thing. Previous to the detour opening, the Waka Kotahi team did drive the route and do their own hazard assessment. I also asked our inspectors to do the same and include the likes of Pinfold Road and Smiths Road to make sure all of our regulatory signs were in place. So though the yellow line wasn't in place on Moores Road, all of the appropriate signage was in place. And if it wasn't, then it had to be fixed immediately before the detour. I just did that. I felt that was just good network stewardship, that, we're doing our part for the safety of our community as well. So comms has been raised as an issue, and there is also a feedback meeting on Monday, including all parties. So if you do want to add something, feel free. While the detour was in place, responsibility of the detour was handed over to Waka Kotahi. So if there were any accidents or such, if we were not to respond to them, they were to be responded to by Waka Kotahi. I did notice they had a lot of patrol vehicles out. Whether that was enough, I'm not sure. I did have you had another question. Oh, sorry, about inspections. So we did do an all faults inspection, but we also have our Roadrunner technology to film the detour. So I've had the whole detour filmed the day before opening and 3 days after closing, so that we can. And that's for the purpose of saying these edge breaks have got bigger. We've got 5 new potholes, so that we can, we can tally that all up and say. Yeah, so we'll program in our shouldering works and things like that, but the work has to get done, it'll get done. But I did a lot of that pre-work to make sure that we can make any claims back from Waka Kotahi that we need to make. So that's where we're at the moment.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Stephen and Councillor Peter.
Thanks for raising that. Thank you, Chair Kerry. I think from the RCA, that was one thing that came through very clearly from the Minister, was to consider road closures as an efficient and cost-effective way to carry out work. But I think this is a prime example. I actually want to go one further than your lead at Waka Kotahi, because I intend to raise this at the Regional Transport Committee, but also send the costs and the information directly through to the Minister, because that was dangerous. I got a puncture on that tyre. I had to use that road a few times over the process. It also has 1-lane bridges that actually have no markings whatsoever, any visitor to our district. So whilst they may have saved some money, the cost to our people, the safety, and to our roads, I think will come out on the other side. So I think this is the way that Waka Kotahi are going to go forward. Actually, I think we need to provide so this one could have been managed a lot better. So if you can share that data with me, but the RTC meeting is coming up shortly, and I think the Minister does need to see those costings.
Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair Kerry. I congratulate you on your work you're doing, and obviously all the things that we were thinking you've got into. But luckily no one died, so that's a plus. Once you're dead, you're dead. And if it was a car full of kids, well, we would have got on national television. We always do things in New Zealand after the fact, which is sad. It's a state of our nation, really. But anyhow, in this particular incident, do you think you've got any other tools in your toolbox that you can implement so we can just say, hey, Transport New Zealand, you cannot open today because of A, B, C, D, and E? Have you at this present time got those tools, or you haven't?
So at this stage, there is a national detour map that we run through. When Jack Steed was corridor manager, me being asset manager, we run through with the likes of a journey planner to say this road is only appropriate for one-way travel. This road is not appropriate at all. And that's taking into account things like our local knowledge, where we've got very narrow culverts on Moores Road, railway crossings people don't think about, and that sort of thing. So there is that information available internally to Waka Kotahi based on our local knowledge. And then the other, I'm not au fait, I suppose, with corridor management, but that would be a negotiation then between corridor management and Waka Kotahi, us agreeing to let them use our corridors, would be my imagining. But I would have to follow up on that for you.
Yeah, supplementary to that, Chair. Yeah, because that's the thing. Obviously, you did allow them to do it, because obviously, and you're not corridor management, Jack is, but by giving that right, they had really total control. But it would be in our district the death. So, yeah. So all I wish for going forward is that, and I know obviously, but personally, I would hopefully you've got more tools in there. You'll say no, because as soon as you accept it, you've given it.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And I can assure you there have been many backwards and forwards emails before this detour with our concerns and the things that, you must do this, you must do that. And as Andrew said, their internal processes have also fallen through the cracks. So going forward, this is we've learnt our lessons from our side of the table, so we'll implement them going forward for sure.
Yeah, Kerry, yeah, likewise, I'm pleased you did the before and after. I guess it's a moot point as to whether we have any control over whether whether a bypass can be put in place or not. Do we?
But there have been cases in the past that we have stopped them doing this. This one in particular, obviously, the conversation led to the route being selected and utilised. But there have been some ones that we have pushed back on, and it has changed their plans. They're more particularly probably around the northern end of the district, around some of those back narrow roads. Whereas I think this was deemed the carriageway width was deemed sufficient in terms of actually just getting two trucks past. And obviously there are a few key points like the narrow bridges and bits and pieces. I know a couple of times I went across, it's like, oh crap, this is a new one. But yeah, there is tools, and we have pushed back previously. So we myself and Jordan are in a position to actually answer some of the decisions that were made to allow it. But yeah, we will. It's very much front and centre of it right now. So we'll dig a bit deeper.
Yes, I know when Waka Kotahi announced it, well, it was probably at the RCA forum, but to close roads rather than have miles and miles of orange cones and delays and so on. I applauded the decision, and I guess I still feel that it is a step in the right direction, but it needs fine tuning, certainly. But thanks for your efforts on that in that regard.
Thanks, councillors. I guess we'll just await for the results of the review and what you, perhaps at the next meeting, you've got more to say, Andrew and Jordan. No, it's certainly been a bit of a discussion in town, hasn't it, for a few weeks? Significant discussions. So thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Sharon. Right, we'll get on to, we're on page, any more on page 10. Page 11, Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to talk about 3.4 briefly. Really pleased through you to Hamish, really pleased to see some of this health and safety and zero harm audit stuff coming through. Without, I guess, digging into it now, it was more just a clarification question. The Chair of Audit and Risk has asked for some of this alliance information to come into the Audit and Risk Committee. Will there be a bit more detail on that in our Audit and Risk agenda?
Yes, through your chair, Kerry. Yes, that's certainly the intent. This is just a starting point to get the ball rolling, and we're working with Stephen Dunn, our risk insurance manager, to make sure that we get that in an appropriate format and to the right level for that meeting.
Yes. Scott and Hamish, page 12.
Yeah. 4.2.2. How are we looking? We all got meters on our houses? And when do they start going in? Please.
Scott, do you like a quiz at the same time?
It's along the same vein.
Councillor Scott, get your question, then we'll let Chris. Welcome, Chris.
You're in. Thanks, Mr. Chair. My question was in a similar vein to Councillor Wallace's. Was more asking when we do get some more information on that in the report, will that also include options of looking at perhaps some of our smaller suppliers, thinking of Ekirahuna as an example, and costs sort of broken down to smaller ones, so we can be looking at how the trials might work. And quite interested in how that will be presented to us.
Thanks. Hamish, would you like Marcus and Chris to handle this, or you've got some first? Just press the button, Chris, as you go, and we'll just let Scott and Marcus handle this.
Through Chair Kerry. we've been doing some planning work around universal water metering. So the first step has been to, we went and met with New Plymouth District Council, who are currently undertaking their own, so that we learn the lessons of their 4 or 5 year journey rather than repeating the same in this district. And that was a fantastic session with them, and they've offered us ongoing support. I'm from the New Plymouth district, so I've got some good connections that we can continue to tap. So we're now moving into a detailed plan, and by the end of July, we'll have a detailed plan in place for water metering. It's a complex challenge because it requires multifaceted work streams around community engagement, the technical aspects of choosing the right meters. All these different things have to be considered, but we'll define those different work streams. In terms of costs, we have received some rates that New Plymouth have used and had to update from them, and that will give us an early indication of what costs are going to be like. My intention is to work with Marcus and the team who have a really strong understanding of the networks to put specific network conditions onto costs, beginning with the 4 main centres and then looking at the smaller ones as well, and thinking about things like inflation and those kind of exposure factors.
Thanks very much for that. It sounds really encouraging to be able to learn some of those lessons. It's really helpful. I suppose where I was kind of coming with my original question, we have some advantages within our district of having some advantages and disadvantages of having multiple water supplies. So looking at if we are going to be testing and trialing, having an option of looking at some of our smaller centres first, so then we can also learn real lessons within our district as we go forward. And it's really just seeing if that would be part of that report that you're presenting.
Yeah, again, through Chair Kerry, what I would say is absolutely. So New Plymouth's approach was exactly the same. So they've looked at smaller urban centres outside of the main towns and trialled through that process to provide as a means to do that. So one of the tasks that we need to do is to sit down and prioritise the towns, and one of the criteria will be the opportunities that trials and kind of creating visibility through those trials creates.
Yeah, through you, Chair Kerry. I've forgotten your name, sorry. No,
Chris.
Mark. The question I ask, I hear that when you do a repair, your Toby or whatever new fit has actually got a place for the meter once we get it. Is this correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yep. But not all manifolds are necessarily just as Chris said, dependent on the type of meter that we choose that's suitable for Tara's needs. There may have to be some adjustments made to the manifold because some are different heights. So the manifolds that we put in currently are for the analog type, which are smaller. However, some of the more the remote ones can be a little larger, so there may be some adjustments required.
So what you're saying is the bulk of the work that you're putting in now will work. I hate hearing things are going to be done twice because we didn't think it, like the opening stage there.
Yeah, so we're actually currently going around surveying all of the manifolds to see the suitability. So we're measuring all of the manifolds to see, what the greatest bulk of meters would fit into that situation. However, there may be ones that have gone in over the years, previous years, that may not be suitable. So there may be some rework required. But that's because we didn't plan for universal metering previously.
Thanks very much, Marcus. Councillor Sharon.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. Thanks, Chris. I'm pleased to know that we're learning from other councils. A number of us attended a meeting with the LGNZ president Sam Broughton the other day, and he reflected on the experience they had in Selwyn, where they took little town by little town. So, you know, they didn't just go, it was, let's see how it went there, and the comms and all of that meant they had quite a phased process across their community. So I twigged to that and thought maybe that's something that we'll be thinking about.
Yeah, 100%. That's front of my mind, and so it's going to be getting that balance of cost efficiency from scale, but not going too fast. And so it's a really tricky balance to play, but that's something that's front of our mind, and Marcus and I'll be working on that pretty hard over the next month and a half or so. Yep.
Thanks very much, Chris and Marcus. I think councillors, we've reached the point where this has become more important to us, isn't it, as a step of our three waters. So you've got total support around this table to push on with this, Marcus, anyway. And I like the sound of your experience, Chris, too, from actually doing it. So that will be very helpful to us, because one of our big challenges has been here not only the metering of the towns for supply, but trying to get some parity in our extraordinary supplies, which are just which I don't know whether that's the same in New Plymouth. Has it been some?
Yeah, they found some significant disparities out in rural areas where there were a lot of connections that they weren't even aware of. But more importantly, I would say, Chair Kerry, that that through the first phase of water metering, they found sufficient leaks in their network to repair, which has actually saved the entire construction of a new water treatment plant. So the opportunities from demand side management are significant. Right.
That sounds very promising, Chris. So thank you very much for that. So that's page 12, councillors. Page 13. Pretty self-explanatory for the time being. Page 14.
What's the fingers going on this?
We'll move through this way. Councillor Sharon, Steve, Scott and Mike.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. I might have beaten some of them to the there's a couple on this page, but the first and foremost, 4.5.1, prematurely aged, mostly due to severe atmospheric corrosion. This is in the Paitoa water treatment plant, Marcus. How does that happen? Prematurely aged, mostly, sounds like my face, but we won't go there. Chemicals.
Yes, sorry.
It's to do with the design of where the chemicals were placed in the building, and there was no air or insufficient air movement around that. So the chemicals actually cause premature corrosion of some of the ancillary items in there. Yeah. So it was a bad design decision, essentially.
Councillor Scott. Is that okay, Sharon? Yeah, Councillor Scott.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, interesting design decision. If I could just jump back quickly to 4.4.5 and 0.6, looking at the pre-treatment plant and flip tank. So looking for the Dannevirke impounded supply decisions that we as a council made. Out of curiosity, it's saying that's on hold pending the receipt of the key issues and assessment report. Is there a potential that they will not be needed? So, I mean, there's pretty significant investment that went into those and a decision made by us. But I'm just wondering, is there perhaps a glimmer of hope that they may not be required?
Through you, Chair Kerry. Thanks for the question. So there is a glimmer of hope. I guess we need to know that there's more than a glimmer before we can make some solid decisions. So we have engaged Chris and the rationale team again to do another little piece of work. So Chris, if you'd like to just quickly explain what that's about.
Yes, certainly. It's intertwined with a number of decisions. So, so we're doing a piece of work on a number of fronts. One of them is looking at the Dannevirke water supply and looking at storage provisions long term and what the different options are that might mean we avoid significant investment there. As part of the wider strategic planning, which is in the report later, we're also just looking at all of the water supply catchments and making some strategic decisions in a proactive way under different funding models, whether they be constrained, prioritised and like unconstrained funding models, so we can demonstrate to central government what's required for this district in order to support growth, resilience, all of these aspects. So I suspect that some of these decisions as well will get wrapped up with that as well in the coming months.
Well, thanks very much, Scott, because I did have a note myself there. I was going to ask something. So, Chris, just on that 4.6, with the 6 megalitre treated supply water tank that we'd agreed, this was the treated water supply, which was we're processing. Are we proceeding with that, or we're just putting a little hold on that for the time being as well?
So currently, we will be proceeding with that. However, the chances of that, the chances of that happening this financial year is nil, essentially. That is about resilience of the water supply. So there is under 24 hours storage in the current reservoir. So we do need to get that to at least 2 days storage. And the other aspect is we had the seismic assessment on the old reservoir, which does require some substantial work to bring that back up to the required.
One on Edenose Road, isn't it?
Correct. Yes, the concrete 1960s tank.
Yes, I think you're really. Thanks, Mark. Councillor Scott. Oh, sorry, no, Mike. Sorry.
Through you, Chair. A couple of questions. One, I hope the serious injury by that person he's recovering, he or she. The other one was I had the same query as Councillor Ward's. What age is that plant, please? And the other one was the Woodville supply. Is it possum proof now? Is there no likelihood of birds or animals getting into that Woodville supply, please?
Through you, Chair Kerry. We've certainly done our best to make it possum proof. I wouldn't like to say 100% hand on heart. I mean, it's a 120-year-old building that has all sorts of nooks and crannies and spots. We've had builders go around a couple of times, and we have spent a bit of money to try and make it as close as possible to possum proof. But we're checking it every work day, every day of the week at the moment, just to make sure that there's nothing in there. And we are catching all sorts of animals in the traps up there. So there is an awful lot of animal activity. So far, so good. The repairs, the most recent repairs have worked so far.
For Steve, then. Councillor Scott. It's a Steve, Peter.
Thank you, Chair Kerry. Just going back to 4.5.1, what's our preventative measures other than obviously the prior to a swimming pool? Would like to know this too, because it's not rocket science to figure out what makes corrosion. I know if you live by the sea, it's corroded, but we obviously got a plan in place going forward.
Yes, through you, Chair Kerry. So we've had an investigation done on the situation down at Paeatua. The chemicals are stored right next to the plant itself within the building at the moment. So there's a door in place, but it's sort of all open air. The fix is basically going to put them outside and pipe them in instead. So that work's underway as we speak. So that problem will go away, and there'll be some remedial work to remove the corrosion on the equipment in there.
So supplementary to that, what do you? It's a figure. What do you think the total cost could end up being to the damage of that $7.2 million plant?
Through you, Chair Carey, I don't need to be guessing at this stage. Can certainly come back to you on that one.
Chair Kerry, I think my questions have been answered. That the last one being, my understanding was there was going to be a shed built outside somewhere at the Pahiatua treatment plant, which presumably is the case. But just while I've got the mic here, can I just say, Chris, that your report under Rationale, that's your firm, I take it, was extremely good, very thorough, but very succinct, and covered everything. So before I forget to say to mention that, I'll mention it now, even though it's probably premature. But no, well done.
Thanks very much for that, Marcus and Chris, and thanks for that, Peter. I think probably most of us would agree with that, actually. So we'll carry on with this. Page 15. Perhaps I just wouldn't mind asking a couple of questions myself, Mark. So just paragraph 2. This is just this is getting onto the exceeding abstraction volumes. So the period of time 1st of July 22 to 30th of June. Was that 30th of June this year? 24. That's part 1. And perhaps 23, was it? So the other question I just had, just the terminology in that paragraph. So when it says that it was, did we exceed the consented volume that had been approved, or did we exceed the extended volume approved? I wasn't sure. We had a number of occasions, especially after in 21, where we applied I think we got approval to go across our approved volumes, exceed the maximums. I wasn't a bit sure on this. Perhaps, I mean, Dave's here, he may remember, but I was just a bit unsure. I don't suppose it matters much because we've exceeded it 9 times, but I wasn't sure whether exceeded approval or just the normal.
Yeah, we would need to get that clarified with the consenting manager.
It's quite a bit more technical, so if I just carry on very quickly then. Oh, sorry, just carry on a bit quickly. So down 1, 2, 3, 4, we talked about Blue Tick Accredited. Is that a formal company that does crediting?
Yeah, I can respond to that one, Chair Kerry. I've been supporting Marcus with looking at options. So Blue Tick is a framework, if you like, that's supported by Irrigation New Zealand. So Irrigation New Zealand developed a code of practice for measuring water supplies. They a thing called Blue Tick accreditation was developed, which is just which some suppliers who go out and measure how accurate your flow meters are have this Blue Tick accreditation and can provide you with the accreditation if your flow meter is like. It's just an accreditation system used by the industry. It's not a company. It's many companies have this accreditation. In the same vein, if you're operating a restaurant, you need a food safety certificate. It's the same sort of idea. Yeah.
Yes. So no. So well, perhaps while I've got the mic, same as Peter. So Deputy Chair Steve and I have been talking about this, and Mayor Tracy, for some time. A couple of years back, we did have a good look at the flow meter. So the flow meter here hasn't really been doing what we've wanted to, but I think. But I was just I was interested in how do Horizons double check us? Do they have? Is it manual? Oh, is it manual? Do they have their own system? I was interested to know how they keep a track of us. Thanks. If you know that exactly, I'm sure you do.
I don't entirely know what their internal systems are for that. It's just a requirement of the consent that we have the annual calibration to prove that our flow meters are accurate and telling them the story. It's our responsibility to do that, and Horizons put that on us to meet that condition.
Even in Council here?
So what you're saying, we don't have to worry about getting the check to check the check off the check, because otherwise just go around in ever diminishing circles. But so technically what we're saying, our meter is not blue ticked. So we're not calibrated right. We're a sitting duck.
Correct. It's not calibrated to the required standard. You could ask a number of questions. Why was that not picked up before by regional council, for instance? The methodology that was used. So this is a physical calibration that is required to physically prove that what is going through that meter is going through. Prior to that, it was just plugging a laptop into the electronics and going, oh yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and therefore it's deemed accurate. So there's differences between calibrations and verifications and the methodology used, which is why the blue tick has been stated as the method required, which is a physical check of that meter.
Councillor Peter and then Councillor Sharon. Councillor Peter.
Do you know whether Horizons meters are blue ticked? I mean, they're scattered red. They don't physically go and check them.
I do not know the answer to that, but I assume that they walk the walk if they talk the talk. But yeah. Sorry, I do not know the answer to that.
Just one supplementary, if I may. We're on page 15. Last Thursday, a couple of us were up with Hamish and Brian and Derek at the Woodville Reservoir, and the decision has been made that we need a new reservoir because of earthquake strengthening. It hasn't been made by council, but effectively staff have said, no, we need a new reservoir. Question is, where's that on the list?
It's not here.
Okay, thanks for the question, Councillor Johns. It was in year 4 or 5 of the LTP. So we are looking to bring it forward due to the I guess, current issues that we're having at space, especially after the earthquake assessment that was recently done. Thank you.
Watch this space.
Councillor Sharon, then.
Thanks, Chair Kerry.
I'm just going to back up the bus a little bit. So for a period of time, and I remember it well, drought, whatever, we were forgiven for exceeding our abstraction. Effectively, that's long story short. What begs the question for me is, given these issues with the calibration and, you know, you're not committing one way or the other, water treatment staff have been advised that they must adhere to consent abstraction limits. So given the lack of a blue tick and given, you know, it may be more than just sticking your computer in and making sure it's going, how are our water treatment staff going to adhere to the consent abstraction limits so that we don't get our, because it's going to be more than just a little hand slapping and forgiveness, isn't it? Sorry, Mark, that's why.
It's an interesting question, and it's one that we've asked ourselves, and it's one of the reasons that we did start to look a lot deeper into the Dannevirke flow meter, is the fact of it can go one of two ways, and it can either be reading under or it can be reading over. And you have to question whether or not we're actually taking the amount of water that we can technically take. But it seems to be on the other side of the scale that it's under reading or reading correctly, and therefore you are restricted to that 6,700 cubic meters. But in actual fact, we might only be taking 5,500 cubic meters. Therefore, we're short selling ourselves. Yeah, so it's in our interest to get that sorted out as well.
It's kind of where I was getting the. Thanks, Chair Kerry.
Councillor, Hamish,
just to add to that, and the guys probably holding back a little bit, they do have a plan for getting those flow meters blue ticks, don't you?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've taken a proactive stance with Regional Council. We met with them. I prepared an options assessment on behalf of Marcus, met with them. We found an option that will save us some money, but also meet their requirements. We're just awaiting for Regional Council to give us the blue tick on that so that we can go ahead with design and construction as soon as possible. And then we're moving on to the Woodville one next. So we're working our way through the issues.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor White. Oh, sorry, Scott. Apologies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Two questions on that. Sharon's question covered a good chunk of what I was going to ask, but having a look at, I suppose, some of the enforcement that's coming through from Horizons, and it might be an incorrect assumption, but it appears that Horizons are getting stricter and in some cases more difficult to deal with. So my first question with that is there a reason why that relationship's becoming more difficult? And then my second question, which is a bit of a flow on from that, having a look at the significant non-compliance, getting fined $500 or so, is that a fine that is just $500 no matter what? Or is it a fine that potentially increases if we're not adhering to what we need to?
I'll take a stab at that one first. Feel free to jump in if I missed something. So I don't think it's necessarily a relationship thing. I think Horizons do have more of a focus recently. They're putting more resource into that team that's looking at that work. We do have our own internal compliance team that we've started building. That there's an awful lot of work to do there. They're playing catch up well and truly, and they're trying to be proactive with it a little bit. So trying to get ahead of these reactive things. I mean, Horizons is supposed to be the stopgap, not the. We should know before they do, and that's where we're trying to get to. So the more we can do that, the better off we'll be, and we're better off to go to them and let them know that it's an issue that we're working on and talk through the solutions, then them discover it and out of nowhere and catch us. So that's the plan anyway. The fines, I think they're fairly standard sort of fines. There's no graduated scale for severity, I don't think. It just depends on whether it's a significant non-compliance or
I think you can get to the more serious where a fine you get a fine on a fine on a fine, and then it starts getting a little bit more serious where it starts going up the chain and there's potential prison and prosecution, those kind of things are the final resorts. But yeah,
Is it cheaper just to pay the fine?
Yeah, just $500 fine wants to be 6 months better than a $5 million.
Exactly. That's
construction charge.
Councillor Mike.
Through you, Chair, has there been a cost done on replacing and remedial work on the flow meter for Dannyburg?
No, we'd essentially had to take it out to be able to do that, which we currently can't do because we wouldn't meet our consent conditions. So we're a bit of a rock between a rock and a hard place. And to be fair, the cost of renewing or replacing a meter which is 20 years old, you'd probably be wasting your time. However, the plan will be that we will replace the meter. When the meter comes out, we will get it checked over, and if there's any refurbishment that can be done, it can be redeployed elsewhere. So it won't necessarily just go straight down to the tip.
Just to add to that, so one of the issues is that the flow meter is in a place where it's difficult for it to read accurately. So the flow meter might be perfectly okay, but it's in the wrong place. So I have done as my options assessment, or if we just move it a bit, will that be okay? But it's actually more costly than buying a new flow meter and managing the temporary works while you bring one offline. And yeah, so we've actually been through that process as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Steve.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Would I've been involved in a lot of this, and I'm not trying to get into operational, but they're obviously, you're not ever thinking of putting in a parallel system, because I've worked on 7 of these, and because it's all to do with distance and the physics and everything else, but yeah, does that, and I'm not doubting your technology and I'm not doubting your technical ability, but there must be other ways that we don't end up, because this problem's still going to go away. It's not going to go away if we, do the same thing on the same day.
Yeah, we're fundamentally shifting to a different type of flow meter. So the flow meter that's there is designed for a pipe that's always full of water. That pipe, we can't guarantee that the pipe's always full of water. So I pulled up the drawings on an engineer by background. So I pulled up the drawings and had a good look, worked through with Marcus, and we can see that at times that pipe's only partially full. So the flow meter can't be reading correctly. So we're moving to an entirely different flow meter to deal with that. The alternative was to try and get the pipe flowing full, and take my word for it, that was going to be a significant piece of work. Yeah. So that we've taken an approach. We've looked at all those options. I did look at also setting up a parallel system, and yeah, it creates challenges. It's quite a narrow area, prone to flooding as well, that we're working in. So.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks very much. You can see it's obviously pretty important around the table, Chris. It sounds like we're in good hands. Thanks very much. We'll move on from the water. Still on page 15, onto solid waste. Page 16. Page 17. Finished there, but we then have, we'll just carry on with Chris's report now. So we'll get on to page 18. Page 19. Page 20. Page 21. Page 22. Councillor Sharon.
It's probably a wider question covered off in parts of this report. Very comprehensive. I can only concur with Councillor Johns. This was a fantastic report. Thank you, Chris. I'm curious to understand, and because my colleagues won't be surprised, around item number 4, the strategic planning approach. Very keen to see there's quite a lot of thought gone in. I'm slightly challenged by the fact that you're, in order to enaction and prepare a water services delivery plan, you want an advisory group involved as well. And you've talked further on about, the terms of reference for that. The dates that I highlighted, Chris, you're fairly challenged, aren't you? You're wanting to achieve a heck of a lot, because when I started reading, I thought, oh, this is going to take forever to get all it, But can you give us a sense of, you've obviously done a lot of pulling together of key parts of the puzzle. But I'm curious to understand, as those bits of the puzzle come together, what, in your view, will be the priorities to get this right? Because we need to make sure that the overall plan is actually going to work, rather than it's just pie in the sky. So some of the priorities you've identified are strategic, but there's also some fundamental technical issues there. The reason I'm asking that is that the advisory group, my first question was, you've identified the key stakeholders, no surprises there, but will there be some technical, is it technical skills or governance skills that you're after with that advisory group?
Yeah, certainly, and I'll probably sort of turn to the sort of decisions that we're asking them to support. So we're going to provide some technical support to that group. Myself and a guy called Hugh Ratsey, who's a wastewater treatment specialist, because wastewater discharge treatment are one of the key issues here. So we're going to provide some support to that group. we're not asking that group to get into the nitty-gritty of technical solutions. So really, I'm not going to try and guess what iwi's strategic priorities are, and or regional councils, but I suspect it will be conversations around the criticality of the various freshwater bodies from which we're taking water and discharging treated wastewater into. It'll be questions around economic growth and things like that, rather than getting the technical detail. And so once we've got that, we'll be able to advise them as technical specialists and advisors on what the options are that best match those strategic priorities. And we're really not expecting them to get down to the options. What we want them to do is define the strategic priorities, and then we can assess the options against those priorities and say, well, you've told us that, just shooting here, that growth is your highest priority for the Woodville catchment. Therefore, the best options that meet growth are these. But we will also sensitivity test that and go, well, if we pull a different lever and we say that the ecological value of the river is the highest priority or gets more weighting, then suddenly what does that do to our options? And we'll test that with the group so that they can get to understand the sort of levels of investment required. Added to that layer, we look at 3 funding models: a constrained funding model, a prioritised funding model, and then an unconstrained funding model. And the reason we do that is so that central government can clearly see, when we take this to the DIA, that the gap in supporting growth, resilience, ecological values, cultural considerations, all of these things, we can demonstrate the gap without funding and support from a regional deal or a centralised thing, and or an alternative service delivery model.
So through you, Chair Carey, supplementing that then, Chris, the membership role that you've identified for TDC, is that going to be an operational member, or are you interested in elected members? I guess I'm trying to work out, as I said, is it governance or is it operational that you're going to be seeking the TDC role to have?
So we see it more at No, that's good. We're aiming more at the governance level. So I believe that Chair Carey's been invited to the first meeting for to establish that. Roger Earp and I don't think Hamish, are you on that list? Come along at that level. Really, we want to make sure the most successful models I've seen around New Zealand where this has been used as the way forward are where they take a leadership strategic position, and then we move into a support. So they say, well, we're interested in this particular issue. Can you come back with a report on the technical aspects of that? And we have the challenge of breaking that down into terms that a wide range of people can understand, but that's all good. We're aiming at governance strategic level with them.
Yeah, that's clarified that point. Can I please be excused? Oh.
That's better.
Gary, well, that makes sense because both Ngāti Kahungunu and Rangatani wouldn't be operational or technical either. It makes sense to the governance plus those ones.
Thanks for that explanation, Chris. It's I couldn't reiterate Peter's comments more, really. I think we've been grappling with this around our long-term plan and in this committee for some time now, but I think you've grabbed the ones that really worry us too and touch base on them. So it's not much comment. I think they're all there. It's just getting on with this, isn't it, really? And we're forced to. I was just going to ask yourself or through to Hamish, the government are going to announce some timelines in the middle of the year. Do you think, what would likely be the end? What do you think? Any whispers when they'll want these reports back, Chris?
Yeah, that's a topic that is hot in my mind. So last Thursday, Wednesday to Thursday, I went to a forum of CCO managers and interested advisors in Limington, and then met with the DIA afterwards. So the Department of Internal Affairs advised me that we expect transition legislation in the next 2 weeks. For that will be a interim measure by the government to give some direction to local government, but that what we've proposed here is in line with that. So that's good news. This council will have to make will have to provide an update to DIA in September on where they are at. So we need to have the strategic prioritisation work done and some understanding about council's views on the direction it wants to take around service delivery, whether that be CCOs or COCs or community trusts or just status quo, and that's a piece of work to do. And I met with Raj today, and we're doing a planning session on the 4th of June around exactly how we're going to get to September. By the end of the calendar year, they will come back with their final legislation once it's been through select committee. By May next year, 12 months after the transition legislation is introduced, you will be required to submit a water services delivery plan, which is exactly what we're working to. So we've put a program together that works on that. Time is of the essence, but we feel if we keep moving, we'll get there. And that's about as much as I've learned, but it's I've got my ear close to Wind Wellington on that one.
Exactly what we want to know. Thanks, Chris. Trace, you think to add into this area at the moment regarding the advisory committee? Yes, surely been a discussion with you.
No, I haven't had a discussion with it, but it is a fantastic report. I think, and I agree with going to that first meeting, but certainly giving some thought, and I know Councillor Johns and I've been involved in one before, having more than one person, so it doesn't allows for a little bit of illness because time is of the essence and you must have the people in the room. So we can have a think about that and put a team forward. But yeah, it's great piece of work and exciting.
Thanks very much. Well, which will move just. We're page 22, page 23. Geez, I'm going over. Page 24. Page 25, which was talking about the advisory group. Enough discussion there. There's no doubt this will come back to us for consideration of membership. Do you think that would be? Will that be in your desk, Tracy, or Hamish and yourself?
Well, have you got a timeline for your first meeting?
The first meeting, me, Tracy, is booked for the 28th of May in the afternoon, 1 till 4 p.m.
Should we have a conversation around the council table? I think. No, I haven't seen it.
No, we've had none. When you're talking, so you've got, sorry, Chair Kerry, you've got Rangatani, Ngāti Kahungunu Horizons. How many members are you inviting in from the iwi, and how many members would you be looking for? Because I guess for me, I'm just conscious that I think when we had the last one, we had 2 members, but actually if you've got another person there that can slot in if somebody's absent, because you just need to keep this moving. So is it 2? 4 or 3?
Yeah, Roger Earp's been looking after engaging with around the membership, but it's at this stage we were looking for 2 representatives from each of those parties to support that. Yeah.
No, thanks, Roger. Sorry.
Councillor Southern, Chair Kerry, are you available to be part of that?
Certainly, no, the 28th or the first meeting. If everyone's happy with that.
I'm keen, I can go to the first one, but we can have a talk about membership if you want.
Thanks for that. We'll go to page 25, page 26. Treatment of wastewater plants, page 27, 28, 29. Sorry.
Page 28, the current, well, the plans for the wetland on the Woodville wastewater system. What's happening with that? It's been some years since we decided to do that, but nothing's happened since.
We were actually talking about that matter yesterday. We talked about all the wetlands yesterday and the program for them. I believe an update is due to come from the PMO on the programming of all of those wetlands. We are going to just test the wetland concept with iwi through this advisory group across the board. It's certainly helpful from one perspective. So but I understand the PMO are looking at the timing of design and construction of all these wetlands.
If I could just comment on that, we did spend 18 months, 2 years with iwi going through the options, whether it was at wetland or whatever, some time ago. And the net result of that was agreement by both iwi eventually that they were happy with that. So unless something's changed or the wetlands are not a good idea now in somebody else's view, it seems to me to be status quo. Why aren't we doing it?
I'll just add to that, Chair Curry. So it's certainly on the list of projects to be done, but as you see, that consent isn't due to expire for quite some time yet, so it hasn't reached the top of the list. So there's other ones that are much closer to their due date that we need to prioritise over this one. It will certainly get done. We just can't do 1,000 things at once.
Peter for comment. Page 28, page 29. And that's the end of quite a comprehensive report. Thank you, Hamish, Chris and Marcus. Very good value for that. Thanks very much. So we'll move on to, governance stuff. So if we get a mover and a second for Councillor Steve and Councillor Loma, all in favour? Aye. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for that. Very much appreciated. Right, council, get on to roading and we'll just get that Cyclone Global Roading Recovery, which is Hamish and Andrew. Leave it in your hands, but Andrew.
Chair Kerry. I'll take the report as read. But yeah, generally in summary, winter's coming. We're working very hard to try and get as much closed out as we can before the rainfall really hits. We've been very lucky to date with limited rain. I know the farmers are hurting, but it's good from a construction sense. Funding is very much on the radar right now with some news coming from NTTA over the last few, was it last week or the week before, about changes to the emergency works funding criteria, which we've got on the, we've got till the 19th of June to provide feedback for. So I suppose that's the focus right now, is to understand what the dynamics of that could be so we can respond to that, because it could have a few impacts on the, I suppose, how we respond to these in the future. But essentially, I suppose, yeah, the report is there. If there's any questions, can take them and answer.
Let's go, we'll make a start from Councillor Sharon and then Councillor Scott. Anything in the report?
No, I like it. I like it. So it's nice to me the usual questions.
Thank you, Chair Kerry. 3.7, Andrew. All sites presented received concept approval. Some require access to additional funding to progress to construction. How many and which ones vaguely? Under at risk, sorry. I mean, I guess I'm thinking, you know, we've got some big dreams out there that are still associated with the recovery, but what could they possibly, they know?
So I suppose what the session I went through with our investment advisor the other day was to review our optioneering reports, which is basically us looking at our fault, throwing back and forth, or basically presenting him with a range of different options, starting with doing nothing, lowering a level of service, repairing to the same level of service, or building back with resilience, essentially. The process, as we've gone through that with the majority of works, if you look, I suppose if you look at one of my charts that I got there, page there, each one of those in scope development phases when we do that, and then we push it into detailed design basically once we've got NZTA's acceptance that that is the best option for repair, taking into account economics and the, I suppose, dynamics of the site. Once we get that approved, essentially, obviously it moves through the various different processes until you get to the detailed budget. Once you've got a plan, you can build up the budget and you know what it's going to cost. What we did the other day was basically backtracked through historic ones we haven't had a chance to get through to date with them, and that was particularly targeting the ones that we've got in construction at this stage, which we've got budget to complete, the ones that are in procurement stage, which we have budget to complete, and the ones in detailed design phase, which are progressed in various different forms of, I suppose some are just about there with the view that they're going to be ready to go in October once the construction season starts. But fundamentally, probably to answer your question, is of the 12 sites that are in detailed design, they are the sites that where the level of service of the network is impacted to the point that we've either lost a big portion of one lane or as a safety issue that needs to be addressed to basically mitigate the risk to the public. Of the 12 that are in detailed design phase, just putting a number out there, probably 50%, we have budget to complete 50% as it sits right now. But the purpose of going through that review with our investment advisor is that he accepts the repair and the associated cost of the concept cost of repair. Feeding on further through that is basically they are working through the funding, the next stage of funding now. So verbally, there is a risk, and it's more probably associated with the National Land Transfer Program review. I did get an email on Thursday last week saying that he was literally had some information to go and present to the minister about it with Tararua's application, which we whipped up very short, sharp, rough thing. So it was very much, oh, I need something by 2 o'clock, and it was like 1:30 at that point. So, but yeah, it is very progressing as we speak, and I dare say this time next month we should have an answer.
Yeah. And then Councillor Scott.
Gary, I take it 310 is covered. Your last comment, you should know by next month the answer to 32, e.g. the 1 in 20 year event now to a 1 in 10, or from a 1 in 10 to a 1 in. From a 1 in 20 to a 1 in 10.
Yeah, so no.
Is Gabriel a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 20?
So in terms of 310, that is, we're in consultation period right now, which closes on the 19th of June. They are intending to implement it based I suppose the 1 in 10 side of things next financial year. So come the 1st of July. The changes to the FAR rate is the next financial year. So basically got 1 year lead in before it will impact costs. July 2025, I think it's pegged as. But I suppose the biggest impact, that the risk we have associated with that is it's very hard to define a 1 in 20, 1 in 10 and 1 in 20 year event within the Tarawa district. Right now, essentially what they do is basically a 1 in 10 year event. They go to the NIWA database, and they've got the definitions of rain. That's where the 1 in 20s come, the frequencies of those things come through. Tarawa district only has three rain gauges for the Tarawa district that basically feeds that data in. There are other ones around the district which are more, some of the farmers and bits and pieces have them, but they're not official, they're not registered, and they don't have that historical, a lot of them don't have historical data. So what we've been seeing in the last 2 years, we've been getting weather bombs in specific locations. And when you look at where the rain gauge that we're monitoring it from is, nothing happened there. So you might get 3 millimeters of here, but you know you've got 100 and something millimeters that's fallen 5 kilometers down the road. So what we've been doing over the last few years, and this was, I suppose, since I started working on the applications for it, is the Akatio Bridge. They're always a good pointer to know what the river level is there, because you can basically see the peaks and troughs as you've got your baseline flow that's going through there. You get your normal winter flows and storms a bit speeds, and all of a sudden you'll see a spike that goes up, and then you'll know, well, that's actually something's happened to the district that's triggered it, and then you can usually connect it back to a storm. So we've been getting approval on that largely for the last 2 years, because a lot of the storms that we've had haven't actually tripped over that 1 in 10 year event, but we've managed to get the funding approved. Advice from our investment advisor is it's guidance only, that 1 in 20 year event. So we can tell the story, we can put the picture forward, and the intent essentially of what I'm working towards is trying to get that clarity around the weather modelling in the Tarawa, given that we've got, I mean, even if they said 1 in 20 year right now, because we don't have the rain gauges showing the historical amounts, you can't actually gauge what's 1 in 20. You need 20 years of data to actually build up that.
No, NIWA want to be scientific about everything, but as a good base for them, I mean, I know three farms in the Tarawa district that take daily rainfall records and have done for the last 80 or 90 years, daily. That would seem to me to be a pretty good base for NIWA to take on board, even if it's just to, you know, if they've got nothing better, why wouldn't you take that? It seems crazy not to. But anyway, I guess my question is, this could be a bloody time bomb for us. Absolute time bomb. What have we spent on Gabrielle? What has Waka Kotahi spent? 100 million, is it?
So we have 45 million available for spending right now. We've got another 45 million there lodged. But yes, I suppose in terms of financial risk, this is something that we need to be aware of. We need to be putting our best foot forward in terms of our response for the consultation. I suppose the intent behind without, I suppose, understanding, reading through there's a wealth of documents essentially to get through before we actually respond. But essentially my reading of it is that I suppose across I think it was 2021/22, NZTA exceeded their emergency works available funding in the national long-term plan. Forget the name, forgets me, but essentially they're using it as a way to say, unless they get additional funding through through central government, they can't continue to fund it as they sit, which is, it's almost their pitch to say, central government, come on, you need to actually start looking at how this is being done. It has all got a lot of wording around the level of service as well, around the networks and that, and they have been, I suppose, pushing through Gabriel the view of, do you need the same level of service within the district, and repair them to the same level of service as that you have, which the current guidance from the emergency works documentation says you restore the level of service. So that's what we act on, essentially restoring the level of service. I suppose in summary, watch this space. It is, yeah, it's only recently come out, and I mean, literally last night I was reading through a big long PDF of all the actual detailed terms and changes, and I suppose the bullet points they sent here do look scary, the actual terminology in what they work to, there is probably opportunity to, it's actually giving a bit more, there is a bit more clarity in it around like the resilience repairs. They are opening the door, I suppose, a bit to exploring a bit more resilience work in the district to reduce the impact of these events, which from my personal opinion, would be very good investment, whereas they haven't funded that historically. Since I've been in the roading game, it's always just you fix the problem, that's it. It's like, well, what about that big massive thing up the hill that's going to fall down? No, that's not the problem. Yeah.
Thanks. We'll just Councillor Scott, Councillor Steve and Mayor Tracy.
Thanks. Sorry, thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking at the proposed changes at 3.1 as well, particularly, and thanks for the explanation around the qualifying events, but you know, the reduced enhanced VAR rate from 20 down to 10. Out of curiosity, because obviously the consultation period is pretty short and sharp. What's our strategy around providing a strong response to this? Because, you know, this could have quite an impact through to, you know, future events for us. So what's our plans? Like, how are we looking at putting together that feedback to make sure that we get a really significant reply through to Waka Kotahi that I guess hopefully gets us the best possible outcome. Also just thinking how we're linking in with LGNZ with this. I know that they've already publicised some work that they're doing on behalf of councils, but yeah, I suppose I'm just wondering what the plan is.
You, Chair Kerry. So we're taking a bit of a coordinated approach across the board. So Raj and his team are looking at the financial implications of what that would do to us in the modelling of TP and what we've got on the books at the moment. Peter Wimsit's involved. Andrew, obviously, is the network manager, is involved, and I'll be involved. And I think we would like to bring you all into that group as well, whether it's coming to you with the draft sooner rather than later. And I think the other part is that they will be getting an awful lot of submissions. So I think we have to utilise other avenues as well, which is we will be leaning on our other industry connections through LGNZ. I've got connections through the road efficiency group and Taringa Maimoa, and Mayor Tracy has some connections through as well to the Minister. And I think we just got to utilise all those things to highlight our concerns.
Very quick comment, Mr. Chair. And thank you for that. It's encouraging to hear. And I suppose just to note, Sharon has a subcommittee in her committee that looks at submissions as a purpose. So I'd encourage it to come to that committee for those that are interested. Right. Well, the subcommittee gets called on an ad hoc basis, so it can come at any time to that.
Thanks for that roading discussion, everybody. It's a pretty critical issue for us, isn't it? There's millions at stake, really, isn't there? Just not more than a few dollars. So that's nearly at the end of this one. Councillors, we'll do. Where do we? Oh, well, we've just had this roading report in its entirety. Is there any other matters in that report that you'd like questions on? No, that's great. Thanks very much, Andrew and Hamish. So someone like to move and second, we accept the recommendation. Councillor Sharon, Councillor Scott, all in favour? Thanks. Carried. Thank you very much for that. And 7.2 capital portfolio. So Mike, invite you to the chair. Thank you. So you just handle it any way you like, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor Tracy, councillors. I'm not under any time constraints today, so I'm going to be running away halfway through. I will take the report as read. If there's anything that you would like me to go into, I think one of the pieces that I'd just like to highlight again is just some of the resourcing. I know that we talked a bit about that at the last committee, so I know we're all aware of that. As you can see, the capital projects by status, we do intend to have a trend one coming through, and that will be seen as well in a couple of other further committee meetings as well. So we can get better identification with that. Jumping into it as well, you can also see the red, amber, green one has been tracking with the trending as well, and you can also see that we're our work so far within the project risk levels. So if there's any questions on those.
Right, thanks very much, Mike. So we get Councillor Peter, Councillor Kerry.
Kerry. Page 43, Mike, right at the top there, the Dannevirke alternative water source. What was the result of the drilling that's been done to test flows in the Tamaki?
Dave up.
Yeah, that's.
Chair Kerry, Mayor Tracy, councillors. Where we are with the alternate water supply is we now waiting to have discussions with Horizons on we put the 150 bore down, got a tentative reading of what and I think I reported on that a couple months ago, what flows we had there. We're only about 13 metres deep. We talked about we got a price to put a 300 bore down and then do some severe pumping mechanism work to get flows, recharges back in the river, all that sort of stuff. So that's sitting out the side. We've got that price. So we're just at the moment waiting so Peter Wims is jacking up a meeting with Horizon staff to talk about the low flows in the Tamaki and the lower Tamaki when it dries up. Because the tick in the box has to be that it has to be worthwhile for us to carry on putting a bore there. And I think I reported that last time. So at this present point in time, I mean, Pete's been on holiday for a week. He's had COVID for a week. He's been crook for a week. I think he's back on deck now. So I was only talking to him about it this morning. So we're going to talk with the hydrology team. But basically, we're not going to go any further till we find out what the gain is for us to spend money in the lower Tamaki. Because otherwise we'll be putting money against the wall for nothing. So basically that's where it's sitting. So we're waiting to have that discussion and get the information from them so we can bring it back to you guys.
My understanding though, it's the same take, so the consent applies. If we can't take water from our normal inflow, we can't take water from a bore either, because it's deemed to be the Tamaki River water, is it not?
So the idea, just to retract, the consent at the Tamaki when there's no restrictions is 110 cubic meters, 110 litres a second, I should say. It's not 100 cubic meters, not enough. And when it becomes down to low flows, we were in really low flows in the top Tamaki, or the upper Tamaki, we're down to 54 litres a second. And we're possibly using anywhere between 65 and 70, give or take a couple of litres. But down at the Laws Road side of Tamaki, there's another stream that comes in, and that's why a few years ago I used to mention about Philip Hartridge being able to irrigate while we were in low flows. And that was because there was more water in the lower Tamaki because of, we used to call it Stevenson Stream. I think it's a different stream actually, named wise. So what that's virtually saying, so say we're in 54 litres a second up the Tamaki, we might be able to take 65 down in Laws Road. So that's what we're going to define, is whether, is there a gain on us going any further? If there's not, we might as well stay up there. And the other thing we need to talk about is with them is because it becomes 110 litres a second over the two. So if we were bore down Laws Road and the infiltration gallery up at the intake where we are now, is it possible when we're in low flows that we can take the 65 from lower Tamaki and still take 10 or 15 up here? So that's another, because they're defining 110 litres a second over both of them, does that give us 2 bites at the cherry somewhere along the line? That's another answer we need.
That will be resolved at this meeting, you're saying.
hopefully, we need that information before we actually go and spend any more money. You know, we're sitting there with a bore price. There's infrastructure price if we put a bore in, you know, there's quite a bit of money to put that in. So we need the horse before the cart in the context that we need some guarantees that this is what we're allowed to do.
I'll just add to that. It is one of the variables in that decision making that Chris French was talking about earlier. That big picture for the scheme of Dannyburg, you know, if we can draw continuously enough flow, why do we still need a great big dam or other tanks? So it's really looking at that big picture and making sure that you understand what's going on before we make those decisions.
Councillors are going. Any other questions regarding my project reports? I'll just flick through them if anyone ends up. Water fluoridation plant. IAF project. Councillor Sharon, fluoridation.
Sorry, I was waiting for you to get to the project sheets. Thanks, Chair Kerry. Mike, you've highlighted in around the fluoridation plant the risk there that land acquisition needs to be in place. Are we working towards that, or are we just waiting?
Sorry to jump in. No, through your chair. Yes, we certainly are working towards it. As part of the works is with Peter Wimsett talking about it. But it's also not going to stop the operation. And there is already contingency measures being put in place.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. And just to add to that, I had asked that question specifically, and the land acquisition is to do with the dam, but it will incorporate the area that's required. So it's not a separate cost to the fluoridation.
Yeah, Kerry, just that IAF project, I see that there's some uncertainty about formalising a funding agreement with Tūmai Rā for at least 100,000 as per the agreement. What's the go there?
Project you want.
The only uncertainty around is that we have at the moment a contractual write-up saying that it's at minimum $100,000 is to be put forward to us. That still just needs to be finalised as to what that is. So we do have it in paper that $100,000 is what is agreed on at minimum. But we just need a further discussion with a couple of our key members being sick over the last period. We just need to wait out until we can have that conversation and set a meeting.
It has been agreed between all parties that they will cover.
At minimum, yes.
So it could be.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
That project's tracking quite well.
We'll just food and water treatment plant. Any questions? No. SCADA phase 1. Okay. Dannyburg wastewater treatment plant upgrade. Sorry, I missed that Paitoa wastewater we've talked about. Part of. Sure thing, Councillor Steve.
Through you, Chair Kerry. So that would probably, this new report just came out, that would throw a big spanner in everyone's work on that page, wouldn't it? Or the, wastewater, sorry. I had an aged moment there. I apologise there, gentleman at the table.
Thank you.
Pretty easy. But please get mixed up with these plants, but that many of them. Wastewater treatment. A bit of Wimbledon. I have to say that I just, in a comment I have had some more complimentary comments about the roads works around Akatea and from some of our clients that we're dealing with. So that was nice to hear. Plenty of criticism mostly, but that's the work being done through Andrew and Jordan. It's been it was very complimentary about the standard of work out there. So that's really good to know. So you might pass that on, Hamish, to the team that we are getting some ticks and boxes there, which is great. Sounds like we've just reached that report. The end of that, so could we have a mover and seconder to that recommendation? Councillor Peter, Councillor Naoma, all in favour? Against? Thank you very much, everybody, for that. That's the main part of our report. So we did have a little bit which you agreed to pass on. Thanks very much, Dave. And
Thanks, Martin.
it was just the some of the things talked about today actually were certainly touched upon, perhaps just as an introduction. So me, Tracy, myself and Hamish attended the Road Controlling Authority Forum or days in Wellington, which was really interesting, and it was about road controlling authorities, but it really did morph into it went further than it went further than roads actually. It got into rail and it got into infrastructure and across the board really. And we had the Minister Brown was there, Shane Jones was on, Minister Jones was on screen, and some other Nicola Rosie, the Chief of Waka Kotahi, and some other fairly high hitting people. Interesting some of the stuff that they talked about. I would say myself that Minister Brown was very measured, very controlled. When I look back now where we're talking today, you can see that the government or those groups are having really tight discussions about money, wanting bang for their buck. They're wanting absolutely to see that the dollars delivered, the results for all dollars delivered. That came into the rail discussions, and it came into Waka Kotahi's they're restructuring, looking at making different planning decisions. They're looking at the ways of saving money. They've been asked to save 10% of overheads. They've had no extra money for 8 to 9 years. So they are looking at costs, which is unsettling for us, I guess, isn't it, for our little council. Conversely, it was interesting, and I'm just sort of going across the board here a little bit, but Shane Jones came out very much on the basis we need to get this country going and we want these projects and we need stuff done, is what he always does. But he sort of threw a challenge back to the members at the meetings and councils, actually saying it's all right to sit tight and wait for the government to come for decisions, but you guys come to the party, you come to us. We'd like to see bright ideas, ways of doing things better. We'd like to know about it. Can you see where we could save costs? You can make benefits. If you can come up with something really beneficial to you that we can stretch out. It was a challenge really, and I did make a note of that. So it was a wide open challenge. But that's just a couple of introductory comments. So perhaps me, Tracy, you might like just to have 5 minutes, and Hamish, me, and then Hamish, and any questions from councillors. So.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. I'll go through my notes and then Hamish can tidy anything up at the end. So it started out with a panel discussion, which I really enjoyed, and it challenged the room, and they talked about, road and rail needed to be funded from one system. We've got a lot of things that are separate, and worldwide those are funded from one model. So New Zealand's very different, but actually, what is the agreed national view on what public transport actually is? And they talked a lot about the infrastructure deficit and not enough being spent on renewals. They talked about the challenge of the election cycle and the need for a long-term view, and I did like this one. They used the reference to at the moment we've got a system of shifting chairs on the deck of the Titanic because they changed the GPS and everything's got a change and adjust for that. So they talked about really needing, Infrastructure New Zealand needing a better pipeline report, what was there, and a bipartisan 30-year infrastructure strategy to take the country forward. They did make a note that 90% of the assets were actually owned by local government, so I think that was a key one as well. They talked a lot about funding on need, and the minister said that they would use all levers to grow the economy. And he did talk about the roads of national significance, different approach to funding and financing. Talked about private-public partnerships and also the tolling of roads. And both the Waka Kotahi's CE, Nicole Rosie, and the Minister both talked about the need to generate additional funding for our networks. He was quite shocked that traffic management's not recorded separately, so you will get that from the minister. He is looking at what that cost is, because there are some rumours of up to a third of projects are spent on that. But that's when he also went into perhaps looking at closing roads and in regards to not using traffic management as a cheaper option. So I think that having some data behind it of what that costs local communities is would be quite helpful. They talked about a risk-based approach, and that was in regards to traffic safety. But they also talked about standard models from Waka Kotahi, where they've got standard models for bridges, drainage, and something that could be consistently applied over all road controlling authorities. The real focus on delivery and efficiency. And he asked, what are we doing, what the government's doing differently, and he noted that in the census data, 75% of people still use cars, and only 2% of people use some bicycles, and we spent $40 million on cycleways in the last 10 years, and we don't have any additional cyclists. It was still at 2%. So that was his data-driven fact there. Nicole Rosie talked about, their strategic priorities being economic growth, increased maintenance and resilience, safety, and delivering value for money. She said that there'd been a flat revenue for the last 8 to 9 years into the NLTP, and that the minister was focused on revenue. She did talk about some of the things that they were changing within Waka Kotahi and some of the systems that they'd put in place to save the 6.5% as everyone had been directed to by the government. They'd been looking at digital engineering for bridges and retaining walls and getting some savings there, and she noted that it saves a quarter of the time by doing that. They've also got some live apps that'll be going, or some apps that'll be going live for ruck and tolls and things like that. So very much embracing technology as making some of those changes, and they'd actually used it. She referenced in their call centre, where 30% of their calls would have changed addresses, so they put some technology in there to address that quite quickly. Focus on national ticketing and safety cameras, so that sort of indicated that some of that revenue might be coming from there. Minister Jones, absolutely, he was all about deliver, and he wanted that at pace and on budgets. He did talk about, New Zealand being at the end of the supply chain. He does understand the challenges that are there for that. But actually, just to highlight the point you were making, Chair Kerry, that solutions that make meaningful change. They certainly wanted to hear those. And he did talk about, Minister, I think. Simeon talked about a volatile weather and genuine emergency powers and things like that they were looking at. A real focus, I guess, they did talk about, wanting to fix every pothole on the state highway network in 24 hours. And that was just got on worse. So I did make a note that I think he had one slide that I photographed to have a look at, just to go back to that, because I thought that was quite a challenge. But I understood it. What the message he was saying is, in a weather event, they can go from the size of a golf ball to the size of a plate, in a short period of time. But it's a big network.
Okay.
And a couple of little gaps. It's pretty hard to follow that act, to be fair. That's amazing notes. So the bit that I took away from it is that they really want us to find efficiencies within the system. So to take what little we've got and spread it a bit further, do things differently, do it in a consistent way, more reporting, more comparisons between things. But Tracy touched on it a little bit, but that traffic management space where they want to reduce the amount of expenditure on it by doing things differently. The problem they have, even starting to look at that, is everybody records it differently. Every contract, completely different coding scheme. The dollars are in different places. Sometimes they're built into other things. They're hidden in overheads. It's just all over the place. So that it's a real challenge for the industry to get that consistent enough to actually be able to compare with our neighbours, or even within Downer, it would be hard work. So I'm lucky enough to be on the Road Efficiency Group leadership team. So I've been dragged into that one. So I'm going to be trying to influence a little bit there. Jordan's joined in the regional champion for, is it the West Coast, or is it East Coast? Apologies. So we've got a bit of inside line there. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on things, and I guess the benefit of having the alliance there is that they are flexible and we can change things as we go. We're not sort of as contractually tied as other people are, so they can be quite fluid in the way they change things. I'll just leave you with the two little parting comments. The minister mentioned the $1 million frog. So there was a project that basically got derailed over some ecological issues with some habitat for frogs. He said that won't fly anymore. That won't go. So there will actually be a benefit cost considered, rather than just going whole hog and wasting $1 million to move a couple of frogs. Take from that what you will. The other part was that we need to get to the starting line faster. So get through all the planning, get all the design, the consenting, all that stuff done quicker. And the fast track bill was still pretty front of mind when that forum happened. And it's very important that we get on with things and actually deliver what we say we're going to do. So I'm personally taking that on for my team. The LTP, we've got to make sure that it's real, that we can actually deliver on what we say we're going to do. So.
Thanks very much for that, Hamish. I must admit, that's one of the things I took out of this too, that both to Minister Brown, Nicole Rosie, and the panel. It was about getting everything done and getting it all done at the start, get the planning done and get on with it. And I do note, I just made one sort of ominous notes at the end of Minister Brown's discussion, or his address really. And I think it went to roading, but I think it was across all infrastructure. He said councils, I guess, really going to have to concentrate on the must-haves, not the nice-to-haves. And I felt, but thinking that into the roading space could be, it could have some big implications, couldn't it, for the big areas like Taurua. But I think, Hamish, I think all of us got to that stage. Get your planning done, get on with it, and get to the start line. So, thanks so much for that, councillor. So any other comments about today? Fairly a lot of infrastructure stuff in there, wasn't there? I mean, there was a lot of infrastructure, but a lot of it's but it's quite exciting that we're making some moves, I think, into the getting the advisory group, and Mr. French was, I think we've got a right person driving that. How big is he? Anything, Raj, that you'd like to add for today from the operations money side? All quiet's good for us, is it? Thanks. Thanks very much. All right, thank you, councillors. We'll declare the meeting closed. Richard.